In the first month of the 3rd year of King Cyrus's reign, Daniel saw a vision revealing continued Persian rule over Israel, followed by domination by the Greeks. 4 kingdoms would arise out of Alexander the Great's Greek Empire, 2 of which would rule over Israel. The Ptolemaic Empire, centered in Egypt to the south of Israel, would be the first of these 2 to rule over Israel. The Seleucid Empire, centered in the ancient territory of the Assyrians, would eventually drive out the Ptolemies and establish control over Israel. Gentile domination and control of Israel would continue. When would the nation of Israel be reestablished as an independent kingdom? I'm Brenda Cathcart, and this is the Voice of the Prophets. In our previous teaching, we followed the conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south up through the reign of King Antiochus III the Great. During his reign, control of Israel passed from the Ptolemies, the king of the south, to the Seleucids, the king of the north. Israel, used to the religious freedom under the Ptolemies, would not fare as well under Seleucid rule. As Antiochus IV Epiphanes took the throne, he was intent on salvaging the Seleucid kingdom, which had been weakened by their defeat by Rome. Antiochus attempted to solidify his rule from within the empire by promoting the adoption of Greek gods and practices across the empire. He rewarded those who embraced his plan with goods and favor. Daniel 11:22-24. With the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, for he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. He shall enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province, and he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, spoil, and riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. Not surprisingly, there were those among the Jewish people who sought favor from Antiochus and willingly traded worship of Yahovah for worship of the Greek gods, riches, and political power. 2 political movements rose in Israel, one holding to the worship of Yahovah and the other embracing Greek Hellenism. The more powerful party at the time was the traditional one that held to the exclusive worship of Yahovah. Antiochus hated the Jews who stymied his attempts to enforce exclusive worship of the Greek gods. One of Antiochus's first acts was to replace the Jewish high priest Onias, identified in Daniel as the prince of the covenant, with his brother Jason, who favored incorporating the Greek gods. 18th century theologian Thomas Scott comments on this passage in Daniel. Most expositors understand this of the Jewish high priest, the prince of God's covenanted people. For as soon as Antiochus was seated on the throne, he expelled Onias from the high priesthood and sold it to his younger brother for a large sum of money. And Onias was soon after cruelly murdered by Antiochus's deputy. Antiochus's focus outside his empire was on regaining the territory lost by his father, especially the regions of Syria that the Ptolemaic Empire was claiming as theirs. Antiochus attacked and defeated Ptolemy Philometor and signed an agreement with him, which both parties planned to break. In other words, they lied to each other. Daniel 11:25-27. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. Antiochus's actions seemed to be driven by both anger and pride. Whenever one of his ambitions or desires did not go according to his plan, he reacted with anger and retaliation. Israel's resistance to the worship of Greek gods and their geographical placement on the border of the Ptolemaic kingdom made Israel a convenient target for all of Antiochus's frustrations. This was demonstrated as Antiochus took out his dissatisfaction with the peace agreement with Ptolemy on Israel. Daniel 11:28. While returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant, so he shall do damage and return to his own land. Ptolemy had lied in his agreement with Antiochus and immediately plotted a way to overthrow Antiochus. When Antiochus learned of the plot, he returned to fight against Ptolemy again, where he once more was successful. However, Ptolemy sought Roman aid against Antiochus. Daniel 11:29 and 30. At the appointed time he shall return and go toward the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter, for ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in rage against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. It was the Romans who defeated Antiochus's father and caused the decline of the Seleucid Empire. Now the Romans were meddling with Antiochus's war against Ptolemy and forcing him to return to his land. This enraged Antiochus, and he took out his anger on the Jewish people. The apostate Jews helped Antiochus take Jerusalem and set up the statue of Zeus, the abomination of desolation, in the temple. Daniel 11:31 and 32. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant he shall corrupt with flattery, but the people who know their God shall be strong, and carry out great exploits. As we know, prophecy is cyclical. Antiochus Epiphanes placed an abomination of desolation in the temple. Yeshua referred to this event when speaking to his disciples on the Mount of Olives. He stated that when an abomination of desolation is once more placed in the temple, that his followers would know to flee Jerusalem because great tribulation was coming. Matthew 24:15 and 16. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Yeshua warns against the dangers to pregnant women, nursing mothers, and fleeing in the winter or on the Sabbath. Antiochus's armies attacked in the winter and on the Sabbath. His forces killed women who circumcised their baby boys along with the babies. Yeshua's words indicate that the time of the Great Tribulation will be like the time of the persecution they endured under Antiochus Epiphanes IV. In the battle against Antiochus, the faithful Jews, led by the priest Judah Maccabees, were strong and against all odds carried out great exploits. However, many Jews died in the fighting against Antiochus's edicts and armies. Daniel 11:33 to 35. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. And some of those of understanding shall fall to refine them, purify them, and make them white, until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. Under Judah Maccabees, Israel won her independence in 165 BCE for the first time since a Babylonian exile 300 years earlier. Israel remained independent for 100 years until Pompey conquered Jerusalem in 63 BCE. Daniel's vision doesn't end with the freeing of Israel under Judah Maccabees. It continues as a new king arises. This king is not described as either the king of the north or the king of the south. Daniel 11:36 through 39. Then the king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished. For what has been determined shall be done. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a god of fortresses, and a god which his fathers did not know he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many and divide the land for gain. The NKJV Study Bible comments on the possible identity of this new king. Many ancient and modern interpreters have concluded that at this point a new person, the Antichrist, is introduced. This king is distinguished from the king of the north, verse 40, so he cannot be Antiochus Epiphanes. Daniel's vision shifts focus now to the time of the end, indicating a possible time gap. The time of the end may be the time of the end of the 77s determined on Daniel's people that he saw in a vision just 2 years earlier. Remember, this vision occurs just after the end of the 70-year allotment of time that Judah was to serve Babylon. Daniel 11:40 through 42. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. At the time of the end, the kings of the north and the south will be helpless against this invader. This king will take over Israel and many other countries. However, the lands east of the Jordan, Edom, Moab, and Ammon will not be taken. Possible identities of this king have been proposed through the centuries based on then current kingdoms. Matthew Poole proposed that this kingdom was the Turkish Empire. This was the empire that ruled over Israel during his lifetime. The Stone Edition Tanakh associates this king with the ships of Cyprus in verse 30, which were identified as the Romans, who intervened in the war between Antiochus Epiphanes IV and Ptolemy Philometor. The Romans eventually came in and conquered both the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires, as well as the land of Israel. All three lands were weakened by civil war and internal strife, allowing Rome to basically walk in and claim these lands. The Seleucid Empire fell to Rome in 63 BCE. The Ptolemaic Empire fell to Rome in 30 BCE, and Israel became a Roman province in 37 BCE with the installation of Herod the Great as king over Israel. Herod the Great was the ruling king when Yeshua was born. Yeshua's death in 30 CE marked the 69th week of years, which was the subject of Daniel's previous vision. Yeshua's death is dated from the decree in Ezra 7:8 by Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem in 457 BCE. At the cutting off of Messiah, the timeline is broken. This portion of Daniel's vision probably takes place in the final 7 years. At this time, the king expands into Israel, but news comes from the north and east that troubles him. Daniel 11:44. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. This news could be of rebellion within his empire, or of another kingdom, or even an alliance of kingdoms attacking from the north and the east. This news infuriates the king, and he reacts in anger, very similar to the actions of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. This news seems to interrupt the king while he is setting up his government in Israel, between the Mediterranean Sea and Jerusalem. Daniel 11:45. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. A good possibility for where he attempts to set up his government is in the Jezreel Valley at the foot of the hill of Megiddo. The book of Revelation explains how the kings from the east are enabled to come against this king. Revelation 16:12. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. The place where they meet is at Armageddon, which in the Hebrew is the hill of Megiddo, which overlooks the Jezreel Valley. Revelation 16:16. And they gathered them together to the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. There, at the place where the king sets up his government, between the Mediterranean Sea and Jerusalem, he will be destroyed. Daniel's vision continues with a shift to the spiritual realm. The angel who brings this message to Daniel was delayed 3 weeks because of the spiritual battle going on. The angel Michael had to step in and help in order for the angel to come to Daniel. We now return to this spiritual battle, which is going on at this same time, the time of the end. Daniel 12:1-3. At that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. At the time of the end, there will be a great spiritual battle over the fate of the Jewish people. It will be a time of great trouble and spiritual battles. Yeshua taught about this day. Matthew 24:4-8. And Jesus answered and said to them, Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. But in the midst of the tribulation and the spiritual battle, the angel told Daniel that his people would be saved, all those whose names are found written in the book of life. Yeshua said that after the tribulation of those days, he would appear to gather his elect. Matthew 24:31. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Daniel is told to seal up the words of the vision. And as he is continuing to watch the vision, he once again sees the man clothed in linen beside the river. Daniel 12:6-7. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. This refers back to Daniel's first vision of the four beasts. In Daniel 7:25, the fourth beast is given dominion to make war with the saints for a time, times, and half a time. Daniel's vision of the 70 weeks of years says that an abomination of desolation will be set up in the holy place during the final 7 years. The abomination of desolation is also referenced in this last vision of Daniel, Daniel 12:11-12. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. 1,290 days is 3.5 years on the biblical calendar, accounting for 2 regular years and a leap year. The extra 45 days to make 1,335 days could be the period of time needed for the last battles and to purify the holy place. Daniel wanted to know when these things would happen, but God declared that the understanding of the vision would be sealed until the time of the end. Daniel 12:9. And he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end." When Yeshua ascended to heaven on the 40th day after his resurrection, his disciples wanted to know if the time had come for Yeshua's reign to be established over Israel. Yeshua declared that only the Father knows the timing. As we approach the time of the end, we, like Daniel, continue to try to understand the full meaning of his visions. When the time of the end approaches, the vision will be unsealed and God will give understanding to his people. I'm Brenda Cathcart for Moed Ministries International. Shalom and be blessed.